Commander Sarah Chen stepped off the transport shuttle and onto the Vakreen trade station. The artificial gravity felt slightly heavier than Earth normal, making her boots click harder against the metal floor. She had made dozens of diplomatic visits in her 15 years of service, but something about this place made her uneasy. The Vakreen ambassador, a tall being with gray skin and 4 arms, greeted her with what passed for a smile among his people. His name was Torvin, and he had been exceptionally eager to show Earth the wonders of Vakreen industry. Too eager, perhaps. "Commander Chen, welcome to Processing Station Gamma 7, Torvin said, his translator device rendering his clicks and whistles into perfect English. "We are honored that Earth has sent such a distinguished officer to witness our manufacturing capabilities." Sarah nodded politely. Behind her, Lieutenant James Rodriguez and Security Officer Maya Okonkwo followed closely. Maya's eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, a habit that had kept them all alive on more dangerous assignments. The tour began in the administrative section, all gleaming surfaces and holographic displays showing production numbers that meant little to Sarah. The Vakreen were proud of their efficiency, boasting about output levels that exceeded Galactic Council standards by 40%. Sarah smiled and nodded at the appropriate moments, playing her role as the impressed visitor. After an hour of tedious statistics, Torvin led them toward the manufacturing floor. The corridor grew darker, the air thicker with the smell of hot metal and chemical processes. Through the observation windows, Sarah could see massive machines stamping out components she didn't recognize. Then Maya stopped walking. "Commander," she said quietly, her hand moving toward her sidearm. "Look at Section 7. Sarah followed her gaze. At first, she saw only the machines, their mechanical arms moving in precise patterns. Then she saw the workers moving between them, small workers, very small. Her blood ran cold. "Torvin," she said, keeping her voice level. "Are those children operating those machines?" The Vakreen turned to look, showing no concern whatsoever. "Ah, yes, those are our junior contract laborers. Quite efficient, actually. Their small hands can reach components that adults cannot. We acquire them from various source worlds and train them from an early age." Sarah felt her stomach twist. "You acquire them? How old are they?" "The youngest begin training at approximately 5 standard years," Torvin replied, as casually as if discussing the weather. "By age 7, they are fully productive. It is quite economical. They require less food than adults, less living space, and they learn quickly." James made a choking sound behind her. Sarah raised her hand slightly, warning him to stay calm. Every instinct in her body screamed to smash through that window and pull those children out, but she had to play this smart. "I see," she said, forcing herself to breathe normally. "And how long do they work each day?" "Standard shift is 14 hours, Torvin said proudly. "Some facilities run 16, but we find that reduces long-term productivity. We also provide basic nutrition and sleeping quarters. Quite humane, really." Maya's jaw clenched so hard Sarah could hear her teeth grind. Sarah put a hand on her arm, a silent command to hold position. "And this practice," Sarah continued, "is common throughout Council space?" "Oh yes, very common. Approximately 60% of member species utilize some form of juvenile labor acquisition. It has been standard practice for thousands of years." Torvin tilted his head in what might have been confusion. "Is this not done on Earth? How do you achieve optimal efficiency in fine manufacturing?" "We use robots," Sarah said flatly, "and adults who are paid for their work." Torvin made a sound that the translator rendered as a laugh. "How inefficient. No wonder Earth's economy is still developing. But do not worry. As you integrate further into Council society, you will learn our methods. In fact, I could arrange for a shipment of trained laborers to your colonies. Quite affordable." Sarah felt rage burning in her chest like a star going nova, but she kept her face neutral. "That won't be necessary. I think we've seen enough. We need to return to our ship to file our report." Of course," Torvin said, gesturing them back toward the docking bay. "I hope Earth will consider increasing trade relations. Your species shows such promise." The walk back to the shuttle felt like an eternity. Sarah could feel Maya shaking beside her, could see James's hands balled into fists. They couldn't speak, not here, not where their words might be recorded. They had to hold it together just a little longer. The moment the shuttle sealed and began pulling away from the station, Maya broke the silence. "Commander, we have to go back. We have to." "I know," Sarah said, her voice cracking. "I know. James, send an encrypted burst transmission to Earth Command. Priority Alpha. Include all our sensor recordings of that facility." "Already done," James said. His fingers flew across the control panel. "I started recording the moment Maya spotted them." Sarah stared out the viewport at the massive station shrinking behind them. Somewhere in there, children were working in conditions that would make ancient Earth factory owners look merciful. And the Vakreen thought this was normal, thought this was civilized. "How many?" Maya whispered. "How many children are in that station?" Station manifest listed 15,000 laborers in the juvenile category, James said, pulling up the data. "Commander, I'm seeing similar facilities across Vakreen space, and they said 60% of Council species do this, if we extrapolate across Council territory." "Don't," Sarah said. "Not yet. Let Earth Command run those numbers." But she couldn't stop herself from thinking about it. The Galactic Council had over 200 member species, thousands of worlds. If 60% of them practiced child slavery, and each had facilities like the one they'd just seen, the number would be staggering. Unthinkable. Millions. Tens of millions. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks at maximum jump speed, 3 weeks during which Sarah barely slept. 3 weeks during which the crew of her ship watched the recordings over and over, disbelief turning to horror, turning to cold fury. When they finally reached Earth, Sarah was summoned immediately to United Earth Government headquarters in Geneva. She walked through corridors filled with grim-faced officials, each one looking like they'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. The Secretary General met her in a secure conference room. The walls were covered in data displays, showing information that made Sarah's vision blur. 40 million. The analysts estimated 40 million children held in various forms of servitude across Council space. "Commander Chen," the Secretary General said, and Sarah had never heard the woman's voice sound so cold. "We've verified your findings. We've also discovered that the Council has known about Earth's opposition to this practice since first contact. They assumed we would adapt. They assumed we would accept it as the price of galactic citizenship." Sarah said nothing. There was nothing to say. "We're calling an emergency session of the Galactic Council," the Secretary General continued. "Earth will demand immediate abolition of all child servitude practices. We will demand the liberation of every enslaved child and reparations for every species affected." "And if they refuse?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. The Secretary General looked at her with eyes like iron. "Then we will show them exactly what happens when you harm children in the presence of humans." Sarah felt something settle in her chest. Not peace, but purpose. Humanity was about to make a choice that would define them for all history. They would either save these children or die trying. There was no other option. There never had been. Because humans, for all their flaws and failures, had always agreed on one absolute truth: children were precious. Children were innocent. And anyone who hurt children would face humanity's wrath. The stars themselves would burn before humans turned away from enslaved children. The war was coming. Sarah could feel it in her bones, and she welcomed it. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was held on the neutral station of Concordia, a massive structure that floated in the space between territories. Ambassador Marcus Webb stood in the center of the Great Chamber, surrounded by representatives from over 200 species. Some looked like insects, others like living crystals. Still others defied any comparison to Earth life. All of them were watching him with expressions that ranged from curiosity to contempt. Marcus had been a diplomat for 30 years. He had negotiated peace treaties, trade agreements, and cultural exchanges. He knew how to read a room, how to find compromise, how to make everyone feel like they had won something. Today, he would not be doing any of that. Honored members of the Galactic Council, he began, his voice echoing through the chamber. Earth comes before you with a matter of urgent moral concern. We have discovered that 60% of council species engage in the systematic enslavement of children. 40 million children across council space are held as property, forced to work in dangerous conditions, denied basic rights and freedoms. A ripple of sound moved through the chamber. Some species made clicking noises, others hummed, still others remained silent. The Vakrine representative stood, his forearms spread wide. The human delegation appears confused about cultural practices, he said smoothly. What Earth calls slavery, we call structured labor education. These juveniles are taught valuable skills and contribute to galactic productivity. This system has functioned successfully for millennia. Marcus felt his hands tighten on the podium. You are selling 5-year-old children and forcing them to work 14-hour days in radiation-saturated factories. There is no education in that. There is only cruelty. The Thelian representative, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline matrix, pulsed with colors that the translator rendered as laughter. The humans speak from emotion, not logic. Their species is barely civilized by galactic standards. They have been council members for only 15 years. Perhaps in time they will understand efficiency. We understand efficiency, Marcus said, his voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. We also understand that any civilization that harms children is not a civilization at all. It is a monstrous machine that deserves to be dismantled. Shocked silence filled the chamber. Species that had existed for millions of years stared at this representative of a species that had only reached the stars 2 centuries ago. The audacity was breathtaking. The Council Prime, an ancient being from a species whose name humans couldn't properly pronounce, spoke in a voice like grinding stones. Earth presumes much. You are junior members of this council. Your economy, your territory, your military strength are insignificant compared to ours. You have 12 star systems. The council spans 200,000 worlds. You cannot dictate morality to civilizations that were ancient when your species was still in caves. Marcus looked up at the Prime, meeting those alien eyes without flinching. Then Earth makes this demand simple. Abolish child servitude within 6 months. Release every enslaved child. Pay reparations, or Earth withdraws from the council and closes its borders. The chamber erupted in noise. Species shouted in languages that the translators struggled to process. The Prime raised one massive limb and silence returned. Earth would choose isolation over cooperation? You would doom your species to backwater irrelevance over internal policies that do not concern you? They are children, Marcus said simply. That concerns us. Then you have 30 days, the Prime said coldly. 30 days to come to your senses and apologize for this disruption. If you do not, the Council will implement economic sanctions. Your ships will be denied access to Council space. Your trade will be cut off. Your species will stagnate and wither. Choose wisely, Ambassador Webb. Marcus stood tall. Earth has already chosen. The transmission cut off and Marcus found himself back in his quarters on the station. His hands were shaking. He had just declared economic war on an alliance that controlled most of the known galaxy. Earth would be crushed. Humanity would be pushed back to its tiny corner of space, isolated and alone. His communication console chimed. It was a direct link from Earth from the Secretary General herself. You did well, Marcus, she said, and he could see the grim determination in her face. Come home. We have work to do. The 30 days passed like a countdown to doomsday. Earth's media network showed nothing but coverage of the enslaved children, images taken from 100 worlds. Humanity watched children who looked nothing like them. Children with scales and feathers and chitinous shells, all working in conditions that no child should ever experience. Something awakened in humanity during those 30 days. Not just anger, but a cold, focused purpose. Every nation on Earth, every culture and faith and philosophy, found common ground. Children were sacred. It didn't matter what species they belonged to. It didn't matter what they looked like. Children deserved protection and humanity would provide it. The governments of Earth called for volunteers. They expected thousands. They got hundreds of millions. Young people who had never considered military service lined up to enlist. Engineers who had been designing civilian ships requested transfers to military projects. Scientists who had been researching peaceful applications of technology turned their minds to weapons, not because they wanted war, but because they wanted to save children. On the 30th day, the Galactic Council sent its sanctions order. Earth's response was broadcast on every frequency, sent to every world in council space. The Secretary General stood before the cameras, flanked by the leaders of Earth's major governments. Behind her, military officers from every branch of service stood at attention. "The Galactic Council has given Earth a choice," she said. "Accept child slavery or accept isolation. We reject both options. Instead, Earth announces the Innocence Protocol. From this moment forward, any child of any species found in servitude will be liberated by any means necessary. Any species that profits from child slavery is now an enemy of humanity. Any facility that holds children in bondage is a legitimate military target." She paused, letting that sink in across the galaxy. "The Council believes Earth is weak. The Council believes we will submit. The Council does not understand what they have awakened. For 15 years, humanity has been a cautious member of galactic society. We have followed your rules. We have accepted your guidance. We have hidden our true capabilities because we hope to be good neighbors." The image behind her changed, showing the shipyards of Mars. Thousands of warships hung in space, sleek and deadly designs unlike anything in Council fleets. "No longer," the Secretary General continued, "Earth goes to total war mobilization. We will free every enslaved child in Council space. We will do this through negotiation if possible, through force if necessary. We do not want this war, but we will not turn away from children who need us." She leaned forward and her voice became steel. "The Council can withdraw their sanctions and begin liberating children. Or they can fight us. But understand this. Humanity has been practicing war since before we left our caves. We are very, very good at it. And we have never fought for a cause more just than this." The transmission ended. Across Earth, ships began launching. Hundreds at first, then thousands. The factories of Luna and Titan worked at maximum capacity, producing weapons and armor and supplies. Humanity had not mobilized like this since the Unity Wars that had forged Earth into a single government 2 centuries ago. Military analysts watched in disbelief. Earth was choosing suicide. The Galactic Council had ships that could shatter planets. They had weapons that could ignite stars. They had been practicing warfare since before Earth's sun was born. But they had forgotten something that humans never forgot. There is no force in the universe more terrifying than someone fighting for the defenseless, and humanity, for all its flaws, had never learned to abandon children. The first human strike teams launched toward neutral space, toward facilities that intelligence had identified as holding enslaved children. The teams carried not just weapons but medical supplies, warm blankets, and people who had spent their lives learning how to comfort traumatized children. The galaxy was about to learn a lesson that would be written in fire and blood across the stars. Never harm children in the presence of humans, because humans do not forgive. Humans do not forget, and humans will die before they let children suffer. The line had been drawn. The war was beginning, and the stars themselves would burn before humanity backed down. Captain Jennifer Park watched her tactical display as the UES Redemption dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Around her ship, 50 other human warships materialized in the darkness of space. Ahead of them, the Kelvor processing facility hung in orbit around a dead moon, its lights blazing against the black. "Status?" Jennifer asked, her voice calm despite her racing heart. "Scanning now," her tactical officer replied. "Facility shows 17,000 life signs. Roughly 3,000 are adult-sized. The rest are children." He paused, his voice catching. "Captain, some of those signatures are reading as young as 4 years old." Jennifer felt ice in her veins. 4 years old, barely more than babies. She thought of her own niece back on Earth, safe and loved and allowed to be a child. These children had none of that. "Communications, broadcast our message," she ordered. The comm officer nodded and activated the transmission. "Kelvor facility, this is Captain Jennifer Park of the United Earth Ship Redemption. Under the authority of the Innocence Protocol, we are here to liberate all children currently held in servitude. Surrender them peacefully and no one needs to be harmed. Refuse, and we will take them by force." The response came quickly, laced with arrogance. "Human ship, you have no authority here. This is sovereign Kelvor territory. You are in violation of Council law. Withdraw immediately or face consequences." Jennifer looked at her crew. They were all volunteers. Every single person on this ship had signed up knowing they might die today. Not one of them had hesitated. "Engineering, are the transporters ready?" she asked. "Ready, Captain." We can start pulling children out as soon as we get a lock. Marines, are you prepared for boarding action? Lieutenant Marcus Chen's voice came through from the hangar bay. We're ready, Captain. Just give the word. Jennifer took a breath. This was it. The moment that would define everything. She thought about those children inside that facility, scared and hurting and believing no one cared about them. She thought about what kind of universe allowed this to happen. All ships commence rescue operations. Marines, you are go for boarding. Show them what happens when you hurt children in front of humans. The Redemption surged forward, its weapons charging. Around it, the human fleet moved as one, a dance they had practiced 10,000 times in simulation. The Kelvor facility began launching defense drones, automated weapons designed to keep unwanted visitors away. The human ships tore through them like tissue paper. Jennifer had seen the Council's weapons technology. She knew their ships relied on plasma cannons and particle beams, weapons that were powerful but slow to recharge. Earth's weapons were different. Humanity had spent centuries perfecting the art of throwing metal very, very fast. Railguns launched magnetically accelerated projectiles at a fraction of light speed. The kinetic energy alone could punch through most Council shields. The defense drones exploded in brilliant flashes. The human fleet pressed forward. We're in transporter range, the engineering officer called out. Locking onto juvenile life signs. Starting extraction. On screens throughout the bridge, Jennifer watched as scared children began materializing in the Redemption's medical bays. They appeared in small groups, clutching each other, covered in grime and wearing rags. Human medical personnel moved forward with gentle hands and soft voices, but the Kelvor weren't giving up their property without a fight. Weapons emplacements on the facility itself opened fire. Heavy plasma cannons that could have disabled a Council cruiser with a single shot. The human shields absorbed the impacts, and the fleet returned fire with precision, not at the sections holding children, but at weapons, at power generators, at defensive systems. Earth had sent its best tactical minds on this mission, people who could calculate firing solutions in their sleep. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the facility. The comm officer said. They're threatening to execute the children if we don't withdraw. Jennifer's blood ran cold. Around the bridge, she saw fury on every face. They had expected resistance. They had prepared for fighting, but threatening children? That crossed a line that turned human mercy into something far darker. All ships execute emergency extraction, Jennifer ordered. Get every child off that station right now. Authorization code Alpha Override. Marines, board that facility and secure all children by any means necessary. Anyone who points a weapon at a child is a valid target. The transporters worked at maximum capacity, pulling children out in groups of 10, 20, as many as they could lock onto at once. In the hangar bays, assault shuttles launched carrying Marines in powered armor, soldiers who had trained for urban combat and hostage rescue. The Marines hit the facility like a hammer. They breached through airlocks and emergency hatches, moving with the efficiency of people who had spent their entire lives preparing for war. But they also moved with something Council soldiers didn't have: the desperate need to save children. Lieutenant Chen led his squad through the facility's factory section. All around them, machinery stood silent, production halted by the attack. And there, huddled against a wall, were 20 children of a species he didn't recognize. They looked like small reptiles with scales that shimmered in colors he had no names for. They were shaking with fear. Marcus pulled off his helmet, letting them see his human face. He knelt down, making himself smaller and less threatening. Hey there, he said softly. My name is Marcus. We're humans from Earth. We're here to take you somewhere safe. No one is going to hurt you anymore. The children stared at him with huge eyes. One of them, braver than the others, took a tentative step forward. Safe? The child whispered in a language the translator barely recognized. Safe, Marcus promised. I'm going to pick you up now, okay? We're going to get you to a ship with doctors and food and warm beds. He scooped the child up gently and the others followed. His squad did the same, each Marine carrying as many children as they could manage. They moved back toward the extraction point, weapons ready but focused on protection, not aggression. Throughout the facility, similar scenes played out. Human soldiers found children in chemical processing areas, in machinery maintenance tunnels, in radiation-saturated reactor rooms. Each time they stopped being soldiers and became rescuers, they wrapped children in their own cloaks. They gave them water and emergency rations. They spoke in soft voices and promised safety. The Kelvor security forces tried to stop them, They quickly learned that humans had a rule. You could shoot at human soldiers all day long and they would return fire with professional precision. But if you threatened a child, humans stopped being professional and became something ancient and terrifying. A Kelvor guard pointed a weapon at a group of children, trying to use them as hostages. The human Marines responded with such swift and overwhelming violence that other guards simply dropped their weapons and ran. Humans, they realized, fought differently when children were involved. 6 hours after the operation began, the last child was evacuated from the facility. 17,000 children now filled the medical bays of 50 human ships. Doctors and counselors moved among them, treating injuries and offering comfort. The children came from dozens of species, many that humans had never encountered before. Some had been in servitude for years. Some had been born into it and knew nothing else, but all of them were safe now. All of them were free. Jennifer stood in one of the medical bays, watching a young Kelvor child no more than 6 years old sleep peacefully for perhaps the first time in her life. A human nurse sat beside her, holding her hand. "Captain," her first officer said quietly, "we're receiving transmissions from across Council space. Other species are reporting similar liberation operations. Earth has hit 27 facilities in the last 8 hours." "Good," Jennifer said. "How many children?" "Over 80,000 so far." Jennifer closed her eyes. 80,000 children who would never work another 14-hour shift. 80,000 children who would get to be children again. It wasn't enough. There were still millions more, but it was a start. "Set course for Sanctuary Station," she ordered. "These children need proper care." As the Redemption turned toward human space carrying its precious cargo, Jennifer thought about what came next. The Council wouldn't accept this. They would mobilize their fleets. They would come for Earth with everything they had. Let them come, she thought. Let them see what humans become when fighting for the defenseless. The galaxy was about to learn a lesson. Humanity might be young. Humanity might be small. But humanity had one advantage that ancient civilizations had forgotten. They still remembered what was worth fighting for. And they would die before they abandoned that. Admiral Richard Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching 3,000 enemy warships appear on his tactical display. The Grand Fleet of the Galactic Council had arrived to crush humanity's rebellion and restore order. They vastly outnumbered the 400 human ships that had gathered to meet them. By all conventional military analysis, this battle would be over in minutes. The Council fleet had more ships, better shields, more powerful weapons. They had been practicing space warfare since before humans learned to make fire. This should be a massacre. Admiral Morrison smiled grimly. The Council was about to learn why humans had been so careful to hide their true capabilities for 15 years. They were about to learn what total war meant to a species that had nearly destroyed itself before reaching the stars. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison," he broadcast on the fleet-wide channel. "Today we fight not for territory or resources. We fight for children who cannot fight for themselves. Some of you have children back on Earth. Some of you have nieces and nephews. All of you remember what it was like to be young and helpless. Remember those feelings. Remember that every child on every ship we're defending deserves the same protection your families have." He paused, looking at the overwhelming force arrayed against them. "The Council thinks this fight is about power. They're wrong. This fight is about whether we're civilized or monsters, and humans have always known which side we're on. All ships weapons free. Show them what we're made of." The Council fleet advanced in perfect formation, a wall of ships that stretched across space. Their commander, a Thelian named Kresh, broadcast a message on all frequencies. "Human vessels, you are in violation of Council law. Surrender immediately and submit to judgment. Your species will be isolated but allowed to survive. Continue this aggression, and Earth itself will face consequences." Morrison didn't hesitate. "Negative, Kresh. The only consequence Earth cares about is freeing enslaved children. You want to stop us? Come and try." The space between the fleets erupted in fire. Council ships opened up with plasma cannons and particle beams, weapons that could melt through starship hulls. The human fleet scattered, breaking their formation in ways that violated every Council tactical doctrine. Council commanders expected humans to maintain their formation and exchange fire in the traditional manner of space combat. Instead, human ships moved like fighters, darting and weaving with thrust vectors that should have torn them apart. Earth's inertial dampening technology, something they had never shared with the Council, allowed maneuvers that seemed impossible. A human destroyer designated Shadow 7 dove beneath a Council battlecruiser and fired its main railgun at point-blank range. The magnetically accelerated projectile hit at near-light speed, punching completely through the larger ship's shields and hull. The battlecruiser broke in half. Across the battlefield, similar stories played out. Human ships were smaller and had less firepower than their Council counterparts. But they were faster, more maneuverable, and fought with a ferocity that shocked the enemy. Council captains expected orderly combat, where ships traded shots until one side's shields failed. Human captains made suicide runs, rammed damaged vessels, and used tactics that ranged from brilliant to insane. The UES Marathon, its engines destroyed and life support failing, locked onto a Council command carrier and accelerated using emergency thrusters. The captain's last transmission was simple: for the children. The Marathon hit the carrier dead center, and both ships vanished in a ball of fusion fire. But the humans weren't just fighting for revenge. Scattered throughout the battlefield were transport ships, vessels carrying the freed children to safety. Every human warship had one primary objective: protect those transports at all costs. When Council ships moved to intercept the transports, human vessels threw themselves into the path. Captains who would normally preserve their ships for strategic advantage instead sacrificed everything to give the children 10 more seconds, 20 more seconds, enough time to reach the jump point and escape. Admiral Morrison watched his fleet being whittled down. They had destroyed or disabled 400 Council ships, but they had started with fewer vessels to begin with. The math was against them. They were going to lose. "Admiral, the last transport is away," his tactical officer reported. "All children are safe," Morrison nodded. "Good. All remaining ships fall back to defensive formation around the Defiant. We're going to hold this position as long as we can." The surviving human ships, barely 100 now, formed up around the flagship. They were battered, their shields failing, their weapons running low on ammunition. But they weren't done fighting. Then something unexpected happened. The Council fleet stopped advancing. Morrison frowned. "What are they doing?" "Sir, we're receiving transmissions from several Council ships. They're withdrawing from the battle." "What? Why?" His communications officer looked up, surprise on her face. "Sir, they're citing moral objections. 6 species have declared they will no longer fight against humans. They're broadcasting that what we're doing is right." Morrison pulled up the transmissions. Ships from the Valorn Concordat, the Thres Coalition, and 4 other species were breaking formation and withdrawing. Their captains were broadcasting messages across Council space, explaining why they refused to fight people who were trying to save children. "This is Captain Thresvar of the Concordat ship Harmony," one transmission said. "I have watched humans sacrifice themselves to save children that are not even their species. I have seen them die protecting the defenseless. My people have looked away from child servitude for too long. No more. I will not fire upon those who do what we should have done centuries ago." The tide of battle shifted, not because of military tactics or superior weapons, but because of something simpler. Other species were finally seeing what humans saw. They were watching humans die for alien children, and it was forcing them to ask uncomfortable questions about their own civilization. The remaining Council ships pressed the attack, but without the numerical advantage, the battle became more even. Human ships continued to fall, but they took Council vessels with them each time, and always. The humans broadcast their actions across every frequency. They made sure the galaxy saw every battle, every sacrifice, every freed child. In one particularly famous transmission, a human Marine battalion was surrounded on a slave processing world. They had evacuated 5,000 children, but couldn't break through to their extraction point. Command ordered them to leave the children and save themselves. The battalion commander, a woman named Sarah Rodriguez, gave a response that would be taught in human military academies for centuries. Negative command. "We don't leave children behind. If we die defending them." Rodriguez out. The galaxy watched as that battalion held against overwhelming odds for 6 hours. They built barricades. They rationed ammunition. They told stories to the scared children huddled behind them, keeping their voices calm even as enemy fire tore through their positions. Not a single Marine survived when the reinforcements finally arrived. But every single child was saved. Earth declared them all heroes. The freed children were given honorary citizenship in the Marines' home countries. Statues were commissioned. Their names were written in stone on monuments across human worlds. But more than that, their sacrifice resonated across the galaxy. Species that had never questioned child servitude began protesting on their own worlds. Underground movements formed. Slaves revolted, inspired by human broadcasts showing what freedom looked like. The Galactic Council discovered that maintaining an empire built on child labor became difficult when half the galaxy was questioning whether that empire deserved to exist. 18 months after humanity's first liberation operation, the Council was fracturing. 40 species had withdrawn, declaring they would no longer participate in child servitude. Internal rebellions consumed another 20. The Grand Alliance that had ruled the galaxy for millennia was tearing itself apart. Admiral Morrison, promoted and decorated, stood in his new office on Earth. Through the window, he could see children playing in a park. Human children alongside Kelvor, Thres, Valorn, and dozens of other species. Children who laughed and played and were allowed to be children. Admiral, his aide said, entering the office. The Council has sent a peace proposal. Morrison took the document and read it. Complete abolition of child servitude. Surrender of all enslaved children for immediate liberation. Full reparations. Criminal prosecution of anyone who had profited from the practice. They agree to everything, Morrison said in wonder. Yes, sir. They're broken. Half their species have abandoned them. The other half are dealing with internal collapse. They have no choice. Morrison thought about the cost. 50,000 human soldiers dead. 100 ships destroyed. Earth's economy in ruins from the war effort. But 8 million children freed. 8 million children who would never work another day in servitude. Tell the Council we accept, he said quietly. And tell our liberation forces to prepare for final operations. Every child. We're bringing home every single one. His aide saluted and left. Morrison turned back to the window, watching the children play. Humanity had paid a terrible price. But some things were worth any cost. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Never harm children in the presence of humans. Because humans 3 years after Commander Sarah Chen first witnessed child slavery in the Vakreen facility, she stood in a garden on New Haven, one of the sanctuary worlds humanity had established for freed children. The air smelled of flowers that had been brought from a dozen different worlds, carefully cultivated to grow together in harmony. Around her, children played. So many children. Human children alongside Kelvor, Thres, Valorn, and species whose names Sarah was still learning to pronounce. They ran through the gardens, laughing in languages that translator devices struggled to keep up with. They were just being children, something many of them had never been allowed to do before. Sarah was no longer a commander. After the war, she had resigned her military commission and joined the Sanctuary Corps, an organization dedicated to caring for the freed children. Millions of humans had made similar choices. Teachers, doctors, counselors, engineers, people who wanted to help rebuild lives that had been shattered. Ambassador Chen, a voice called. Sarah turned. Despite leaving the military, she had been given a new title. Ambassador for Child Welfare, representing Earth in the new galactic order that was slowly forming from the ashes of the old council. A young Kelvor woman approached. She was perhaps 20 years old now, though Sarah remembered her as a terrified 6-year-old pulled from a processing facility. Her name was Kira, and she had become one of the first graduates of the sanctuary education programs. Kira, Sarah smiled. I thought you were on Centauri Station this week. I came back early. I wanted to talk to you about something. Kira hesitated, her scales shifting color in a way that indicated nervousness. I've been accepted to the University of Mars, medical program. Sarah felt pride swell in her chest. That's wonderful. You'll make an excellent doctor. I want to help other freed children, Kira explained. I remember what it was like. The fear, the pain, the confusion when humans came and told us we were free. I didn't even understand what free meant. She looked at Sarah with large eyes. I want to be able to help the way humans helped me. Sarah pulled Kira into a hug, the kind of physical affection that would have been unthinkable between species before the war. You're already helping just by being who you are. You're proof that the war wasn't in vain. The war, such a small word for what had happened. 18 months of conflict that had reshaped the galaxy. 50,000 human soldiers dead. 100 ships destroyed. But also 8 million children freed. 40 species withdrawing from the Council. A complete reformation of galactic society. Earth had not rejoined the Galactic Council. That institution, built on foundations that included child slavery, could not be reformed. Instead, something new had been born, the Covenant of Innocence. 20 species had signed the founding charter, agreeing to a simple principle: children were precious regardless of species, and their protection was civilization's highest calling. More species joined every month. Not all of them had been involved in child servitude. Some had simply looked away for too long. Others had been victims themselves. But all of them agreed that the old way was wrong, and a new path was needed. Sarah walked with Kira through the gardens, past classrooms where children learned mathematics and art and history, past playgrounds where they ran and climbed and experienced the simple joy of being young, past medical centers where patient doctors treated not just physical injuries, but the deep psychological wounds that slavery had left. They passed a memorial wall, and Sarah stopped. Carved into black stone were 50,000 names, every human who had died in the Liberation War. Below the names was a simple inscription: they died so children could live free. "I come here sometimes," Kira said softly. "I read the names. I try to imagine who they were, what they loved, what they dreamed about." She touched the stone gently. "Why did they do it? Why did humans sacrifice so much for us?" Sarah had been asked this question 1,000 times by freed children from 100 species. She still wasn't sure she had a perfect answer. "Because a long time ago," she said slowly, "humans nearly destroyed themselves. We fought wars that killed millions. We hurt each other in terrible ways. But eventually we learned something important. We learned that we measure civilization not by how we treat the powerful, but by how we treat the defenseless. Children, the sick, the vulnerable. If we protect them, we're civilized. If we exploit them, we're monsters." "But we weren't human children," Kira pointed out. "Most of the children you saved were from species you had never even met before." Sarah smiled. "That's the thing we learned. It doesn't matter what species a child belongs to. A child is a child. They deserve safety, love, education, the chance to grow up and become whoever they want to be. When we saw children being hurt, we couldn't just walk away. We're not perfect. Humans have done terrible things throughout our history, but on this one issue we knew we were right." They continued walking until they reached the central plaza. A fountain stood there, depicting children from 50 different species playing together. It had been designed by some of the first freed children, working with human artists. A group of dignitaries was gathered near the fountain. Representatives from the Covenant species, along with observers from former council worlds that were considering joining. They were here for a ceremony, one that happened every month now. Sarah saw Ambassador Marcus Webb among them. He was older now, the war had aged him, but he stood tall. Beside him were military officers, civilian leaders, and dozens of freed children who had grown into young adults. "Ambassador Chen," Marcus called. "We're ready to begin." Sarah joined the group as 12 ships appeared in the sky above. They were transport vessels, and as Sarah watched, they began landing at the spaceport beyond the gardens. She knew what they carried. Another 1,000 freed children, the latest group liberated from former slave facilities. The war had been won, but the work wasn't finished. There were still facilities operating in the fringes of space, hidden stations where the practice continued in defiance of the new order. Covenant forces hunted them down one by one, liberating children and bringing them to places like New Haven. The ships landed, and ramps extended. Sarah moved forward with other sanctuary workers ready to greet the newest arrivals. The first child appeared at the top of the ramp, a small being with 4 arms and fur that shimmered blue in the sunlight. The child looked terrified. Sarah climbed the ramp slowly, kneeling when she reached the child. "Hello," she said gently. "My name is Sarah. We're humans from Earth. You're safe now. No one is going to hurt you anymore." The child stared at her with huge eyes. "Safe, safe," Sarah promised. She had made this promise to thousands of children now. "Come on, let me show you where you'll be staying. We have food and clean clothes and warm beds. And tomorrow, if you want, you can play with the other children in the garden." The child hesitantly took her hand. Behind them, more children emerged from the ships. Sanctuary workers moved forward to greet each one, offering comfort and reassurance in a dozen languages. As the sun set over New Haven, Sarah stood with Kira and watched the newest children being led to temporary housing. They would be scared tonight. They would have nightmares. Many would struggle to understand that they were truly free, but tomorrow they would wake up without being forced to work. They would eat breakfast without fear. They would take their first steps into a life where they were valued, not for what they could produce, but simply because they existed. Do you think it was worth it? Kira asked quietly. All those humans who died, all the destruction, was it worth it? Sarah thought about the 50,000 names on the memorial wall. She thought about the ships destroyed, the lives disrupted, the cost humanity had paid. Then she looked at Kira, standing beside her as a free person about to become a doctor so she could help others. Yes, Sarah said simply. It was worth it. That evening, Sarah attended a dinner with the Covenant representatives. They discussed matters of galactic importance, trade agreements, technology sharing, security cooperation. But the conversation kept returning to one subject: what to do about the remnants of the old council. 20 species remained loyal to the old ways, hiding in isolated regions of space. They still practiced slavery. They still held children as property. The Covenant debated whether to pursue them or let them wither in isolation. We should finish what we started, argued the Thres representative. Every child deserves freedom, but at what cost? Countered the Valoran ambassador. We've fought one devastating war already. Can we afford another? Sarah listened to the debate and finally spoke. Humanity learned something during our darkest times. Evil flourishes when good people do nothing. If we know children are suffering and we choose to look away because it's convenient, what does that say about us? The room fell silent. Then Marcus stood. Ambassador Chen is right. We fought this war because we believe children deserve protection. That belief doesn't change based on how convenient it is. The Covenant was founded on a principle: children are precious. If we abandon that principle, we're no better than the old council. One by one, the other representatives nodded. The decision was made. The liberation would continue until every child was free. Later that night, Sarah returned to the